It's St. Patrick's Day, everybody. So, of course, it's time to break out the special merchandise for today. The Toronto Maple Leafs / St. Pat's have a back-to-back against the Hurricanes and Senators. We'll get you set up for that one. Plus, Jordan Binnington gets into trouble with the NHL. So, we'll discuss all that and more on today's Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm your host, David Morassutti. Proud to be joined again by my friend Frank Stanisci, co-host of the Candid Frank live program on the Spanglish Sports Network. As always, Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. And now you can catch us up on video form on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. It's your team every day. And of course, today of all days, it is St. Paddy's Day. It's the one time of year that if you bought a Toronto St. Pat's jersey, you finally get to dust that thing out of your closet like I get to do once a year. And it's the one time of year everybody claims to be Irish. Although if you've ever heard of the joke, Frank and I are both Italian. We're just both Italian on St. Patrick's Day. We don't change allegiances on St. Patrick's Day, but we will wear the merchandise. I got my St. Patty's Day. It's my John Tavares one. He doesn't have a captain C on it because I bought it just before he was made captain. I'm like, I got a little ripped off there. I should have gone the C.
How expensive can the C be?
I'm not sure actually.
You can always sew a C under there.
It's, you know what it is? It's like because the numbers.
Are you worried about the originality of the jersey being impacted by the fact that you changed something?
I don't know. Maybe.
Is the value affected by the fact that you modify it?
Probably not. I mean, I would never sell this jersey. I'll tell you that.
Don't pull the tab off the couch or the bed.
The funny thing is the numbers on this are felt too, so it's not like you can just plaster any random green number on here. It has to be felt because it's got to go with all the felt patches on the jersey as well. They're very nice jerseys. Somebody tried to trick me with them yesterday, and I was not having any of it. This is probably one of the nicer jerseys in terms of St. Patrick's. Like the Leafs used to have the green ones. I don't know if you remember what. Actually, I can probably pull up a photo of that one. When they had the green jerseys back in like I'll call it the Sundin era, where it was the green jerseys and the brown pretty much brown uniforms, right? Because they would have
those are the Army ones.
So yeah, I'm gonna bring it up here. So it's so you got the green jerseys, the brown helmet, the brown gloves, the brown pants, brown everywhere. I didn't mind it. That's probably more. That's obviously going back to the tradition of the St. Pat's with the Leafs when you had the brown equipment versus white, blue, all those things. But I don't know. Just these ones, they're more modern. I guess maybe that's why I like them a little bit more. But I mean,
I prefer the color of the green that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I guarantee if they use that color of green, because this is like what I have is probably more of like a shamrock sort of green.
Yeah, emerald green.
Emerald green. See, Frank is very good with colors.
It's Irish. Well, it's an Irish thing, right? The Emerald Isle. That's what they call Ireland. So, so the color is emerald green.
Yeah, so so it's great I get to bring this. I also have a St. Pat's hoodie. I have like a green plaid hat that I can Leafs hat that I can wear. I only get to wear it once a year. Although the hat I wear a little more often. Just on certain days, I'll take it out because you buy a hat, you want to wear it as much as possible.
If I do this on my Ryder green pullover hoodie, you won't know it's them, and you could think it's the Leafs. The same color.
So Frank did try to wear a. I will say he did try to wear something St. Patrick's related, but unfortunately, he has a green screen, and so it wasn't able to differentiate between the colors that Frank was wearing. And
anyway,
so
you can get hat. It's an invisible hat.
Yeah, it's an invisible hat.
We'll be wearing it tonight, David. So we'll be going out for St. Valentine's Day as well.
Okay, very nice, very very nice. Yeah, so the Leafs will get to don their St. Patrick's Day gear. I'm not sure if they're going to wear it in both games because they do have a back to back against the Hurricanes and the Senators. I would assume so. If you're going to have this, it's St. Patrick's Day weekend. I know the Leafs have worn it when they had a game, and then or if it's not on St. Patrick's Day, they'll try to wear it as close as possible. So it wouldn't surprise me if both games the Leafs try to get those St. Patrick's Day jerseys in for both of them. And this, it's very interesting when you look at this game because practice. The Leafs did practice today. A couple players did have practice off. Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, both not at practice. And again, that's probably not any cause for concern, mainly because both players played a lot in the last game. Mitch Marner, I didn't even realize it, against Colorado, he played over 29 minutes, and Austin Matthews played almost 27 minutes. So I'm assuming both players, you know what, there's no need for practice for the two of them. Just give them the night off.
And we learned that we learned in one game that none of them needed a practice. Remember the game they played without practice?
Yes.
And they played really well. I think that was against New Jersey.
Yeah, there was that one too because the road trip and all the travel, they weren't able to get really any practice in. So yeah, so it wasn't that if you saw the lineups on Twitter or following anybody on Twitter about the practice, don't be alarmed about Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. They just played a lot of minutes. They need the night off. Who was back in practice though was Luke Schenn. He was back at practice, and very curiously, I thought Luke Schenn would have been back with Morgan Riley, who he was with before he had his baby and was off for the last little bit. He was partnered with Jake McCabe. Very interesting pairing there. So I guess that will be his defensive partner for his return. I'm not gonna call it for his Leafs debut. I'm gonna call it a reboot in a way. His return to
Absolutely.
Toronto. Yeah. So he is back in the lineup, Frank.
Yeah, don't forget Eric Gustafson will be the extra defenseman.
Yeah, it looks like Eric Gustafson because the Leafs will be going 11-7 again. I mean, I'm expecting a massive ovation for Luke Schenn, but how much do you feel like this is going to be maybe a lot of Leafs fans will come out big for Luke Schenn's return?
Well, let's for most of your viewers probably don't remember exactly what happened when he came to Toronto. He had Luke's Troops, right? Didn't he
Yes.
do a charity thing? And he was, bringing
He took
kids
over.
to
I'm
the
pretty
game,
sure he did it. Then Joffrey Lupul took over for
right?
him when he was
Took
traded. But it was
took over
Luke's
for
Troop.
him. So, depending on how much memory Leaf fans have and how important it is his type of play is to the Leaf fans, I think that's how we'll gauge, how well he's received. So there's a couple of reasons why he should be received well by the Toronto Maple Leafs
Yeah, I
fans.
think you know what, when he was traded. Let's not forget when he was traded all those years ago. He was traded for James Van Riemsdyk, and many viewed that. I mean, it was a steal at the time. James Van Riemsdyk went on to play top line forward minutes, pretty much coming to the Leafs revived his career in a way. And Luke Schenn was bounced around with many teams before he would win with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Got to go back to Vancouver, his home province, and now, or where he played junior hockey, and now he is back in Toronto. And I'm sure that a lot of Leafs fans will be excited for Luke Schenn to come back. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and we're gonna just go over preview a little couple things about the Hurricanes and the Senators, just to give a preview of that matchup. But before we do, let me tell you about today's show sponsor, and that is the FanDuel Sportsbook. It is the number one sportsbook across America, and of course, during March Madness season, now is the time to go and get America's number one sportsbook because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, threes drain, anything you can think of, you can do it over at FanDuel. And if you want, you can combine multiple bets together and get a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. That's fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your team every day. And just a reminder, everybody, on the Locked On Podcast Network, we got every NHL team covered. So if you are looking to see a little more about the Carolina Hurricanes, go check out Locked On Hurricanes. They got all the latest there. And of course, Locked On Senators are frenemies over at the Senators there. Ross and Pilsy always do a great job there. But this is Locked On Leafs. Frank Stanisci is here with me, and we're going to go over the matchup for this weekend. And the Carolina Hurricanes are a very interesting case right now because we know that every person, media wise, always puts the Carolina Hurricanes in the upper echelon of the NHL, but they've struggled to really get themselves to that Stanley Cup final that many believe they should have. They should have been at this point already, given how that team is constructed. Rod Brind'Amour doing a great job there as a coach, but it just hasn't translated in the way I think many expected. And now, for the most part of the season, they were them in New Jersey were kind of going back and forth for the Metropolitan Division. The Hurricanes were able to build themselves up a lead. Now they're only 2 points ahead, and they've just lost their top goal scorer, Andrei Svechnikov, for the remainder of the season. This is going to be the Hurricanes always play the Leafs tough because they are a disciplined, structured team that's always give the Leafs a lot of trouble. I'm going to sense a little bit of desperation from this Hurricanes team because they've kind of really been up and down. They've had some decent wins. They've also had some painful losses, coming this past week, last weekend, two back-to-back shutout losses. This is a team that's really reeling right now, and it's a bit of a dangerous opponent for Toronto.
Yeah, they also have Puljujarvi in the lineup that came from Edmonton, and they're putting him in the first line, and he's a guy that they're hoping plays to his potential, and they're going to give him every chance to do just that. I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure he's been that effective against the Maple Leafs as a player. What will he do in Carolina? Carolina has been a place where players go to play better. Rod Brind'Amour has such a great effect on all his players. He helps them to be the best they can be. This is an organization that was for a long time very cap friendly. A lot of the success that they have now is because they were able to take draft picks like they did with the Leafs and pick players and also put together a crew of guys that are well under the cap space, so that when Puljujarvi became available, they were able to get him, fit him in the they're a very responsible organization when it comes to players' contracts and how much they pay the players, and it kind of motivates them a little. And because they don't have anybody that really gets paid a lot more than everybody else, they have this team spirit that half the people joke about it, but I like their spirit.
Yes, you really do. And you mentioned the cap, and you mentioned that the Leafs at one point did trade Patrick Marleau to the Hurricanes so that they could buy him out. It cost the Leafs a first-round pick at that time, and that first-round pick ended up being Seth Jarvis, who is, among one of those younger stud players for this Carolina Hurricanes team. And I know a lot of people I know are always mad about that position, but let's not forget the Leafs need to get over $6 million off the cap. That's a very tough ask for any NHL team to take that on. And the Hurricanes, as you said, were able to leverage a situation for them there. But when you look at this Hurricanes team, I think the biggest question right now, they have sort of similar things when it comes to Leafs. I was a little surprised, first and foremost, that they weren't as aggressive at the trade deadline. I was on the Locked On NHL podcast this week, and we talked about how they weren't the ones that got Timo Meier. It was their rival, the New Jersey Devils, who got him. Now with the Svechnikov injury, that makes you kind of wonder maybe that was a mistake on the Carolina Hurricanes' part, not going out and just bolstering your lineup, because injuries can happen. You can't always plan for them, but you always want to make sure that you're covering your bases as much as possible. But the real question, I think, right now with the Hurricanes is, which goaltender do you start in the playoffs? Because you got Frederik Andersen, Antti Ranta, and the rookie. I'm going to butcher this name, but Pyotr Kochetkov, who they've all played between 21 to 25 games. Like they're pretty much it's an even three-way split. You don't see this very often in the NHL. And I don't know who they're going to start. I don't even know who is going to start against the Leafs. We're recording this on the Thursday, so the Hurricanes hadn't really put out their lines yet of who will be, who's going to be in the lineup. If Frederick Anderson is even going to go up against his former team, wouldn't be the first time. He has gone against the Leafs before, but we're not really sure what's going to happen there. But that's a very curious situation in Carolina where they have three guys they feel like they can start, but who's the one that they're going to go with?
I think they'll go with Anderson being Toronto.
Yeah, I would think maybe in this one, you have a player that's maybe motivated to go up against his former team. So I think that's definitely the case. And then in the playoffs, I guess right now, if you're Carolina, you're first off, you're going to say, let's see who's the healthiest, because that's also been a problem for this team having a goaltender remain healthy. And then it becomes who gives us the best chance to win. And I would assume that it's the rookie, in my opinion. I think it's the younger guy that gives them, I think, the most upside. And that's not just looking at stats. I've watched quite a few games that he's played. He's looked really good. But I think they need to see, do they have it with Anderson? Do they have it with him? I think he was brought in to be that starter, and I think they're going to probably give him that chance.
Yeah, they could very well be. The other thing, there's a rumor that they made a call to Scotiabank to find out if the Zamboni driver's available.
Oh, God.
Leafs haven't had much luck. Leafs haven't had much
Oh,
luck with
boy.
backup goalies. I just kidding. Okay, Leaf fans, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, I think Anderson's the guy to go with. He's the guy that's supposed to carry the mail for them. And if the team, while the team is not playing well, I, as a general manager, rather have the veteran there because I'd be afraid of the impact. Sloppy play by the team, playing badly with a young goaltender in goal. We know it's just natural that they're a little more fragile. Now, it's an opportunity for them to prove that for the team to prove that they have faith in the young man. But I think they'll go with Anderson. And the question is he healthy? Which is always the question with Anderson, and probably will be in this case as well.
Yeah, that's obviously always going to be something that will factor into any decision. The Hurricanes have had many, many issues with their goaltenders not being able to stay healthy, especially come playoff time. So having three goaltenders right now, it might seem like a luxury, but at times for the Hurricanes, it has been a necessity. So that'll be something interesting there. Now, the Ottawa Senators, I would say, are probably the most desperate team right now in the NHL, mainly because when they made the Jacob Chikrin trade, all we heard was, oh, here comes the Senators. The Senators are going to be the team to watch. They might be, and they went off. I know they went off on a few win streaks. So they put themselves in a position to be players in the wild card. But it doesn't help when you lose games to teams that are not in the playoffs, namely Vancouver. Technically, Calgary is not a playoff team, but they play like a playoff team because they still have some decent players there. So losing there, they lost to Edmonton. Like could not have been a worse West Coast swing for the Senators, who are now, as it currently sits, they are 8 points out of the playoff picture. They do
3 games in hand, though. Yeah.
3 games in hand on the New York Islanders, who hold that final wild card spot. But the bigger issue the Senators have right now is they got Buffalo, they got Washington, and they got Florida that they all have to jump over if they want to get there. And I think that, you look at the way that the Panthers have been playing lately, they have really picked up their game. Washington, they're another team that have a few games in hand as well on Ottawa. But what this means for the Leafs is you're going to have a very desperate Senators team, and they always play the Leafs tough, and that's a recipe for not a good time for the Leafs, especially because they'll be the second half of a back-to-back in Ottawa, which will likely be a home game for the Leafs. Let's just be honest here. I'm expecting a lot of cheers for the Leafs in Ottawa's building. It's always the way it goes, but if you're the Leafs, how do you deal with a desperate team like Ottawa? Because it seems like that's always been a problem for them.
I'd like to add to the point that when you talk about their desperation, keep in mind Pittsburgh's well enough ahead of that pack you referred to that really there's only one wild card position available. So those 4 or 5 teams that are in a cluster, games in hand are great. It's great to have them, but if you have to win them all, it's not like not having the games in hand. So those are tough points to get. How tough is it for the Leafs against a team that's desperate? Well, we've seen in this stretch, we've seen that the Leafs, albeit except for the game against, that they just lost to Colorado, they played a very intense game, which was great. But before that, the intensity was kind of missing, and the teams that were desperate that the Leafs played, same problem that Ottawa's had recently, is the fact that they don't rise the level of the energy that they need against teams that are desperate. So we're going to find out, I think, with this Leaf team that just lost in overtime, in a shootout, they're going to be a little more intense in this game against Ottawa. And they'll have remembered that they lost recently to Ottawa. So to answer your question, I think the Leafs know what they're up against, and they're a pretty proud team. They don't like to lose 2 in a row. They came close to losing 2 in a row in regulation. They didn't. They haven't done that all year. They got a point, and it's not like their confidence is going to be undermined. It's just going to be Ottawa needs to be beaten, and I think they have the motivation to do it, and I think they're quite capable of it.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind here with the Ottawa Senators, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the Leafs, they're not exactly working on their number 1 or number 2 goaltender right now. We know that Anton Forsberg is done for the rest of the year. Cam Talbot has been dealing with injuries, so it's either going to be Kevin Mandolese, Mandolese, I would assume that's how you pronounce it in Italian, Frank. Sometimes Italian names always confuse me.
Yeah, so then they probably call him Mandolese.
Yeah, probably. And then Mad Sogard is the other. The Leafs might see a goal. They're likely going to see a goaltender they haven't seen before. So that's going to be a very interesting situation there. So it's going to be a very, very fun, I think a fun weekend if you're a Leafs fan. Friday night and you get Saturday night. The Leafs, it's been weird. Sometimes the Leafs will play on the Friday night. They get the Saturday night off. You get hockey on both nights, which could be a good or bad thing. It could be that the Leafs give you a good weekend or they ruin your weekend. One way or another, it will be a fun time. All right. We are going to take we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something non-Leafs related, as Jordan Binnington's antics might have just caught up with him. I'll explain on the other side. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with candidate Frank Stanisci, and Jordan Binnington this is a very funny situation because there's not many players in the NHL that you can say might be the most hated player in the NHL. Like, there's not many people that hold that title. Over the last little bit, I do think that Jordan Binnington has got himself to that level. Now, what do I mean by that? For those of you that have not seen, I'm going to actually pull up the video right now and those of you that are listening to the podcast on audio, I'll explain it to you. So the St. Louis Blues were up in this game. They're up 4-1 against the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild made a great comeback and took the lead in the second period. Ryan Hartman scored a goal on Jordan Binnington, and I'm going to say accidentally bumped into Jordan Binnington because and you'll watch the video. If you haven't watched the video, please watch the video if you're listening on audio. I do think this was a bit accidental. Maybe there was intent. I don't know. It didn't look like it.
Well, he's outside the crease, David. The player is well outside the crease.
Slide out of the crease, as you're going to watch in the video here, and all heck breaks loose. So I'm going to play the video here for you guys.
Hartman and the Blues. Binnington coming after him. Hartman skated through Binnington's area and clipped him on the way by in celebration.
And Fleury's over there.
Come all the way down to drop the gloves, but the linesman has a hold of Binnington.
Binnington taking exception after the goal by Hartman. He had a slight bump in. Binnington went at him right away while the Wild were celebrating. Marc-Andre Fleury with no hesitation at all. And Binnington wants his crowd going. Where's Ric Flair?
I will add some context to this as well. Ric Flair, legendary WWE wrestler, got the game started by pumping up the crowd. And I'm like, of course, Ric Flair. The night that Ric Flair is there, all hell breaks loose. And there was another video posted by the Minnesota Wild with Marc-Andre Fleury's audio. He was mic'd up, and he was pretty much saying, "I want it. He wants it. Let me go and in for that fight." And first off, I understand why the referees did not allow it to happen, but the referees total buzzkill moment there, huh,
The
Frank?
fans were really unhappy about that.
Oh yeah.
But the flower pedaled to the other end, and the refs didn't cooperate.
Yeah, so I think the referees it was a very chaotic situation that would have blown up a lot more. And I think maybe the refs just wanted to, we know the refs are trying their best to try to de-escalate the situation there. So I wasn't surprised. And then the NHL decided we're going to give Jordan Binnington a 2-game suspension for unsportsmanlike conduct on what he did with Ryan Hartman. I don't think it was much so for trying to start the fight, but of the fact that he went in there and he got a good shot on Hartman and just he incited everything. Like there was no desire for Ryan Hartman to try to get Binnington going. And this is not the first time. I think maybe this is also the NHL telling Jordan Binnington, you've had multiple outbursts that have gone basically overlooked. To this point, enough was enough for the NHL.
By the league, but not virally. They've all gone viral.
They've all gone viral. We've
they
heard,
just haven't.
and the coach Craig Berube has called out his goaltender too in situations. And I think the NHL finally just said, we found a reason to now suspend you. Enough was enough.
And again, let's repeat. You look on when you had that still shot, the direction the player was going was nowhere near Binnington. In the crease. So it was one of those things. So I think that's another reason why the National Hockey League stepped on it, because it was an altercation that took place outside of the crease, and a goaltender just can't assume that they can behave outside the crease like they can inside the crease. So he had no leg to stand on, literally.
Yeah, and so I just, what? In this situation, it was very entertaining, but I've been very annoyed with Jordan Binnington because it just gets to the point where you're overdoing it. Henrik Lundqvist kind of brought it up too, where maybe for some players they play with such an edge, and that's how they get themselves going, and that's how they get themselves into the game, and that's just their attitude. But in this case, I just think Jordan Binnington, someone's got to tell him that you need to kind of cool it. You got to watch your emotions there. Well, I mean, the NHL, but the NHL definitely has told Jordan Binnington enough is enough.
Yeah, he has to go back to the way he was when he first came up in the league. He had a reputation for being a guy who was unaffected by, when they won the cup. Every situation he remained cool. He had a reputation for being very cool-headed and wouldn't be shaken. It seems after that year, it's been, I don't know. It's just he has to control his emotions, and that's a subject matter that in every sport, every team, that's something that has to happen, because otherwise, only bad things happen when you lose your temper.
Yeah, no, exactly, and maybe also the referees trying to tell Marc-Andre Fleury, we're doing a favor here to prevent yourself from potentially hurting yourself, because I don't know if you guys know this, but goalies don't fight very often, and those that don't fight very often tend to put themselves in situations where you could get very hurt. And
We could bring this to the Leafs, David, and say the best goalie fighter we've ever seen is Felix Potvin.
Yes. Oh, I mean,
we can go to the Leafs.
I was a little, I was a little young in that time, and I believe the only ones that I've seen the Patrick Waugh ones. Those were like the big ones for me. But yeah, I do remember. I mean, it's easy. You go on YouTube, watch Felix Potvin fight him and Ron Hextall, and I think the funny part about that one was Hextall not realizing that Felix Potvin could actually fight.
He wasn't the only one that didn't know he couldn't fight. Nobody knew he could fight. And when I watched that game live, when I saw him come towards, I'm going, okay, he's a brave dude. Yeah, he's brave. And then I started seeing him throw haymakers, and I'm going, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
It really was a surprise to everybody.
No, it definitely was a surprise, and it's always a surprise when goalie fights. I remember probably the most memorable one that I've watched on TV live, not live in person, was Ray Emery and Martin Biron were going at it in a Sabres Senators. Ray Emery, it was a bit of a no contest there. Ray Emery definitely got the crowd going with that one, but yeah, it's not very common, and I don't think it's something that the league wants to see all too much, just because teams don't want to lose goaltenders for fighting and all those things. And actually, funny enough, Binnington and Fleury both got penalties for leaving the crease. Fleury obviously skated the whole length down the ice. So, and it probably won't be the last. I'm going to say this: probably won't be the last time we see something like this involving Jordan Binnington. Just because when we think that he's learned his lesson, he does not.
Yeah, this is tantamount to bench clearing brawls. This is one of the things that reminds the National Hockey League of bench clearing brawls, and we know how they feel about those, right? So,
yes, we definitely do. No, we definitely do. All right, that is going to do it for us here on today's show. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast and on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. And make sure you follow myself on Twitter at @the_Morassutti and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. You can also follow Frank on Twitter at CandidFrankLive. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think about goalie fights? What do you think? Do you think Binnington got what he deserved? Do you think the NHL should have just let Binnington fight and let him get it out of his system? And what are your thoughts on goalie fights in general? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. We'll be back with another episode on Monday. We'll break down the games against the Senators and the Hurricanes. Enjoy your St. Patrick's Day responsibly, everybody. Make sure that if you do plan on going out, make sure you have a safe way to get home. It is a very important time, especially if you're going to go out and watch the game with some friends. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.